Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's Bettcast. Back to school's always been exciting, jumping into the unknown with a new pencil case and a fresh diary planner. But this year, teachers, parents and students are all entering uncharted waters with new normals and realities none of us really expected. So yesterday, Parent Ping asked the question about how many students have been off school with symptoms or colds over the last few weeks. Turns out 59% of children have had cold symptoms since the beginning of term, and 22% of students have been off school for sickness or for quarantine issues. So clearly, we're in a very flexible situation. Our school leaders and all our teachers are preparing and looking at things that they've never had to deal with before. They have to be more flexible than ever and navigate disruption that is perhaps our new normal for this next term or so. A couple of comments about the session today. Please use the chat function and network, meet each other, say hi. We have a number of handouts that are available that we'll speak about during the session, but we'd really encourage you to download and share best information. Also, please do ask questions in the Q&A because we'd love to answer your questions directly. So, introducing our speakers, we've got three amazing speakers leading really strong school groups in England today. We have Zoe Carr, who is CEO of Wise Academies MAT. We've got Matthew Purves, who's Director of Education Services at AET. And we've got Matthew Crawford, who is Trust Leader at Embark Federation. So without more ado, I'd like you guys to introduce yourselves. Zoe, if you would be kind enough to go first, tell us a little about yourself, your number of schools on your mat, and what's your favourite thing about the start of term?
Hi everyone, so I'm Zoe Carr. I lead a MAT up in the northeast of England, which spans 3 local authorities. We currently have 12 schools in our MAT, which are primary based, one with special educational needs provision. We serve
I think Zoe's struggling with her connection. Matthew Crawford, can I move to you quickly and Zoe will come back to you?
Yeah. Hi, Sarah. So my name is Matthew Crawford. I'm Trust Leader of Embark Federation. So we're 9 schools, about to become 12, based in Derbyshire. So I think one of the favourite things, certainly for me, has been the joy of seeing children back in schools. I think schools aren't really schools without children. So it's been the joy of really seeing the children back, settled, and also the staff, how excited they are to kind of be back at school and really enjoying being back with the children, which is obviously their passion and what they love doing. So that's definitely been my favourite thing.
That's great, thank you. Matthew Purves,
brilliant.
Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah, and good afternoon, everyone. Great to see you. I'm Matthew Purves. As Sarah said, I'm the National Director for Education Services at AET. We're a national multi-academy trust. We've got 58 schools pretty much everywhere in England. We've got 32 primaries, 5 special schools and 21 secondaries. That means we've got 32,000 children in our care and 5,000 members of staff. And so that's a big undertaking, but our aim is to be a truly inclusive national multi-academy trust. And I'm excited because my role within the trust is to provide all the services, the support that enables schools to do their job. And the biggest part of that for me at the moment is the virtual learning, and that's both the content but also the tech that makes that work to make sure that our schools can support children absolutely as best they can.
Fantastic. So tell me, what's reopening been like? How are the students and teachers?
Yeah, I'm happy to make a start on that, Sarah. So for us, we had a really settled start back. Like I say, I think the attendance was high. So a number of our schools were saying, it's 98%, 100%. So we had great attendance. Then we have had a bit of disruption through positive COVID cases. So we've had, I think, nine positive cases with our children and 4 staff. So I'm sure not on the scale that perhaps Matthew will have had across us, but the size of Trust Ours is that's quite disruptive. So it was really very, very frustrating at the start for, say, a year 6 bubble that came back, and the children have been back 3 days. They were delighted to be back in school. It was all going, really, really well. And then obviously the bubble, the Public Health England guidance was for the bubble to be sent home. So we've had some really frustrating, some sad bits, particularly for those children and staff involved. But on the whole, it's been a really positive start back, and like I say, the children and staff have really settled back in nicely. And I think some of the groundwork that happened before, the risk assessments and all the hard work that the leaders had put in during the summer holidays, that enabled that to happen.
Thank you, Zoe. Can I come to you next? You next. So how's it been going back? How are your students and teachers?
Yeah, similar to Matthew, really. We had a really positive start and couldn't quite believe how high our attendance actually was, better than the normal start to the school year, where sometimes term time holidays cause you a little bit of problem. But it quickly descended into not quite a rosy picture, and that honeymoon period very, very quickly came to an end with a couple of bubble lockdowns in various places, and just that sort of being on guard daily in case children are needing to be put into isolation, etc. One of the biggest challenges for us that we are trying to start lobbying the government about really is around finance for this year, in terms of the budget element of providing that consistent member of staff, because we've had a number of members of staff as well as pupils who of course are waiting for tests, and the availability of the tests hasn't been particularly great at all. So it's taken far too long, and therefore we are already spending thousands of pounds on supply in terms of just putting teachers in front of children. But on the whole, it's been very, very positive. But we do think that it's going to be a long year ahead of us, and there are going to be a lot of challenges along the way.
And shall I jump in, Sarah? So again, our experience similar to Zoe's and Matthew's. Because we've got those 58 sites around the country, we've had something like 11 or 12 bubbles be popped to date, and that's either a single primary school class, or it's in one of our secondaries, 2-year groups, year 7 and 8, both having to go home. And I suppose, what's been best about that is having a well-oiled response and having practiced that. And the key components of that, I guess, are everybody being clear with the expectation that the virtual learning that the children start the next day is exactly the same as the face-to-face teaching would have been had they been in. And we've done a lot of training with our staff to help them deliver that. It's been about them having Chromebooks in our case, but a device in every pupil's hands to do that, and just getting that timetable out really quickly, and just communicating that message to parents that we're not going back to a period of uncertainty. This is simply 2 weeks while everything's down, but school continues, and at 8:30 tomorrow morning your child will be logging in at this time. And it doesn't work for everybody, but at least we've got that expectation there. But you asked how everyone is, and I'd echo the positivity that we had in terms of everyone just being pleased to be back at school. But we're working really hard to just uncover maybe the gaps, and some of both the academic gaps and the gaps in the well-being of our pupils, because I think sometimes our children are coming to school and presenting a positive face, but there are actually those gaps there, or those upsets that they're carrying from a long period of being home, and we're just trying to do everything we can to get under the skin of that so that they are feeling fulfilled and ready to learn.
Great. And thank you. So sort of on a more scale, what have you put in place to enable the sort of the jumping between face-to-face and remote, or in some cases half and half?
Shall I go first?
Do you want to carry on? Carry on.
Yeah. So one of the things that AET did first when COVID hit back in March was get a device into the hands of every pupil in the trust who needs it. Now, given there are 32,000 pupils, that's quite a big investment. Many of them had what they needed already, but lots and lots didn't. And we started with our most disadvantaged pupils. And it's not just the device, it's the Wi-Fi. So we've sent a lot of dongles home with a lot of pupils just to make sure that they're actually physically able to log in, because without that, you can't carry on with the learning. And it's expensive, but it's absolutely worth doing. And as a trust kind of looking to the future, we are going to put a Chromebook in the hands of every child in the trust, regardless of whether we're in COVID times or not, because actually that enables that switch between face-to-face learning and virtual learning. And the other thing we did, and there's more to say, but I'll pick this out. We invested a lot in the training and support to our staff to deliver virtual lessons. And actually, they're just some really basic things that you can learn about the structure of the lesson, about clarity, about the things that work well with interactivity and the things that work well more with a pre-recorded approach. And we supplemented that with a lot of apps. So be that Seneca or Hegarty or Doodle, and they can actually take on some of the weight of things that you might do in the classroom or homework that you might set and marking that you have to set, but you can set that app up and it gathers the information from the pupil. And then the next day, the teacher's teaching can be informed by where the gaps were in the pupil's learning the night before. Mm-hmm. So devices, training and support for the teachers, and then apps to take some of the workload off the shoulders of teachers.
That's amazing. A device for everybody. That's what a dream. And Matthew, how's it been? What have you had to put in place?
Yeah, I think certainly on the digital strategy side, very similar to Matthew, that is now at the kind of forefront of, and it's kind of a key priority for the trust. And I think obviously first time round when COVID hit, it was a bit of a shock for everyone, and the response, schools had different platforms and different systems. Where I think now one of the things that we're really looking to do, we've had some government funding to set up Google Classroom across all 12 of our schools. We've had £12,000 to do that and invest in the training for staff, but also the setup. And I think it's about having that consistency of approach, but also being able to share the burden really across our staff. And I think that's been really important on the digital side of things. I think we're aiming, like Matthew, to particularly for our most disadvantaged pupils to get a device and also the Wi-Fi side of things as well, which is obviously equally as important.
Yeah. I mean, we're speaking a little bit here about lesson structures and that sort of thing, which is really interesting. But when you've sort of looked at your children as they come back, what have you put in place specifically to? I've read of recovery curricula, and what have you guys put in place for that?
Yeah, so I'm happy to talk a little bit about our recovery program, the Rising Strong recovery program, and basically it's something that during lockdown, I think we knew that our children were going to come back with various different troubles, if you like. And there's obviously some families that would have suffered bereavement. I think domestic violence was on the rise, across the country, and some of our families would have been affected by that. Home learning was a very different experience for some than others. Some it would have been great, I'm sure, but for others it would have been traumatic. A number of our parents losing jobs. So there was a whole host of things. We had families turning up to food banks that we would never have expected. So a massive range of kind of concerns at that time. So as part of that, we devised a recovery program. We worked with an inspirational lady called Sharon Gray, and she worked with a group of our leaders and also some leaders outside our trust as well. And we produced some resources which I've put into the handouts, and I know we'll be put into the chat as well. An amazing set of resources, really. 3 weeks of resources that teachers can use for when children come back to school. But there's so much more in there. That I think there's a picture of kind of 9 teams that were set up. Part of that was around setting up risk assessments, but also kind of trying to get the information from our families so that we meet the children and their needs when they come back. It kind of wasn't a case of straight back into maths and English. We kind of meet our staff and their needs first, and then they can meet the needs of our children. So there's a whole host of resources. There's a section on families and suffering bereavement. There's a 3-week kind of program of resources for 2 to 18. There's kind of work in how to enable staff to kind of settle back into, and how to meet the needs of staff. And then also there's a section towards the end about taking the things that have been really good from this period and making sure we don't lose them and we kind of keep them moving forward. So we've kind of shared the program far and wide. I think the DFE have blogged on it. A number of other organisations have kind of sent it out, and quite a lot of local authorities have adopted it or adapted it to suit their schools. So I know South Gloucestershire have used it for their schools, and then Professor Barry Carpenter spoke about it, and then it kind of we've then had interest from schools as far away as Australia and New Zealand using the resources. So it's something that we're really proud of. It's quite a kind of smallish trust, but something that our leaders have really, the work they've done is incredible. We're so proud of that work, and it's something that we're more than happy to share because we want the impact for it to go as far and wide as possible, really.
That's fantastic. Thank you. So there's a link to that in the handout section and also in the chat. So please do encourage you to grab a copy of that and share far and wide. So we talked a bit about, you alluded there to what you've learned and what you would keep. And so welcome back, Zoe. I would suppose from your time with your schools closed or not closed, with most students not in school, what has been the biggest learnings from there, and what would you keep? What's going to stay? I think we're Matthew, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm happy to do so. Okay. So in terms of the number of things that we would keep, so certainly around systems, a lot of our heads are saying that the start back has been more settled, and so particularly for the youngest children coming back, there's been no parents kind of crying in the classrooms. The parents have been dropping off at the gate, and it's though some of the drop off side of things. So some of that systems and routine has certainly been easier. I think the use of technology. So we've been able to get groups of our staff together quite quickly and easily via Zoom or Teams, and I think that's been amazing, really. That we've been able to to stop the travel, and kind of sometimes the travel between can hamper things. So I think certainly the use of technology and better use and increased use of that we would keep. And then a number of the routines. So even as simple as the children coming to school and their PE kit ready, and the amount of time that can be wasted, in PE lessons, the children getting changed for what can seem like an age, particularly for the younger ones. So, but they've actually been getting an hour of PE, which is lovely. So, in the lesson. So a lot of those things which have kind of come out because of this, we would definitely look to keep in the future.
Fantastic. Zoe, do you
want to go?
Go on. Yep. So go ahead, Zoe. So the question is, what would you keep?
I'm sorry, I'm having such a problem with technology. Would you believe? They keep coming in and out all of the time. So if you'd ask me the question, I'll see if I managed to stay on the line that long.
The question is, what would you?
Is it just what we would change?
Would you keep?
What would you keep? What we would change? What we would keep about this current time? Yeah.
So yes,
I think what Matthew's already said about some of those practical things. We found that managing behaviours being really, really much easier to do because of not having the amount of children on the yard at one time. Those starts and end of the day have been a lot smoother in terms of the staggering, and just that practical moving around school has been much more effective, because just thinking about some things in schools we take for granted has always been the norm, and this has made us rethink about what schooling is and how we can make it different. And some things we'll go back to, and some things we simply won't, because they're working more effectively now because we've had to make those changes. Practical things like having external sinks fitted into our playgrounds, promoting additional hygiene methods in school, which hopefully beyond COVID will just pay dividends for your normal coughs and colds and flu-like symptoms. So there's definitely a lot of good learning that will come from this time when we're finally on the other side of it.
And Sarah, apart from offering to join with Zoe, hunt down her broadband provider and execute them after this call, can I say one thing that I'd keep, and one thing that we're definitely not going to keep. So, support everything that Matthew and Zoe have said around kind of behaviour and around the curriculum. We are trying to be as inclusive as possible as a trust, and so actually we took a pause just before the end of the summer term to check in with every single one of our children, and we did that face to face. 2/3 of them we were able to get to face to face. The other third we had to call because of various reasons that you can imagine. But just taking that time out to check in with them and ask them a set of questions, not just about academics, but about how they're doing as well, and about their home learning environment, about do they actually have a place to study? And if they do, is it quiet and is it settled? And what do they find easiest and what do they find hardest? And what about their relationships with their friends? What's happened in that situation? Taking time to do that uncovers all sorts of areas where we can support and help, actually, that we might not have thought of if we hadn't had those conversations. And we talk a lot about, we serve a disproportionate number of disadvantaged children in our schools, and we're proud to. But we talk a bit about the new disadvantage now, about pupils who have, suffered deficits or problems during the COVID period that aren't obvious unless you take the time to ask them the questions. So we've decided we want to keep that practice of having those conversations. I mean, over the summer, I think we contacted 4,500 of our children about 3 times each during the summer, just to check in on how they were doing, and then we're doing another each and every child check-in in the run up to half term. But we're just really determined to have the honest conversation about what's going on, so that we can free the children to flourish and be happy and learn and succeed. Yeah. But the thing that we wouldn't keep, we have a recovery curriculum in place right now as well. But we don't want to stay there. We want to get back to the normal curriculum, the full curriculum, rich and broad, as quickly as possible. So we're putting a lot of effort in making up those deficits as quickly as we can, so that this generation of children aren't disadvantaged anymore by having been caught by COVID, which isn't their fault.
Thank you for that.
One of the things that we've found is that relationships with parents have been really positive on coming back to school. Yeah. And I think the amount of time and energy that's invested in those conversations, Matthew, where parents see you genuinely caring about the family and going the extra mile and delivering the food parcels and, providing that very practical support. I do think that has really helped parents to develop greater trust of the school system and the staff within the school.
Yeah. I'd echo that. I think that's the feedback we've had as well. So it's a really valuable point.
Thank you. That's great. I'd like to jump into a couple of questions that are coming through from our viewers. The first one's from Melanie Mulligan. So thanks, Melanie. The question is, how will your teachers manage teaching face-to-face and virtually at the same time? If anyone would like to jump in on that.
So I can have a first go. So we're trying to limit the number of instances where teachers are doing both at the same time. I said a little bit about our plans for bubbles going down, which is to switch immediately from the face-to-face to the virtual and not having a hiatus in between. Where we do have children who are at home within the cohort, we're experimenting with having a camera in our classrooms so that the teacher is delivering face-to-face, but that's also being recorded and streamed to the pupils who are at home. I think the thing that really helps you in that situation is if some of the work and some of the practice is done through apps, then you can get that immediate feedback. Or if it's done in Google Classroom, and we're a Google trust, Matthew mentioned this as well. If you can collaborate that way, and the pupils are in their Chromebooks, whether they're in the classroom or they're at home, then that enables that interaction. I think it would be much harder if they could see what's going on in the classroom, but they had to, write things down in their jotters and send it in later. I think you need that combination of being able to see it and having the apps in the Google Classroom in place. I don't know what anyone else thinks.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. So I think the big thing is, with us having, about to become 12 schools, and they're all set up on the same platform, it does make it easier to share resources, and it kind of it kind of helps the well-being of staff, certainly, that you can share those resources, and it's not down to one member of staff to kind of try and do both. They can certainly share much easier between each other. So I think that's a big thing for us. The majority of cases so far for us, the bubble's been sent home. So the kind of staff are isolated as well. So they've been, they've only had to focus on one thing and not the two, which is obviously much easier. And we're trying to avoid them having to do two things at the same time.
So we've tried to split our remote learning strategy into 3 different tiers. So tier 1 would be those children who maybe are at home between 1 and 3 days, and who are maybe waiting for a test result to come back. In that instance, we've decided that we're just going to provide some basic skills, because obviously the teachers are still teaching in the classroom, and it might well be work packs for children to take home that are pre-prepared. But all of these are on our Drive. Again, we use Google Drive, so that sharing that Matthew's just talked about, you can really maximise the resource, because not every year through teacher is having to provide that. We can do that centrally. And then you've got the children who are at home individually for a longer period, because perhaps have been contacted by testing. And we're trying to mirror entirely. However, the next phase 3, tier 3, is that whole bubble lockdown. And that's where the Google Classroom technology really does come in. And as a trust, we've purchased a lot of central Chromebooks that we've got a user agreement for with parents now, and also MiFi, because we've surveyed a lot of our families and they haven't necessarily got sufficient internet in the home, which you could argue we haven't in the trust at the moment from this experience. But so we can put the technology and the internet into the home so that nobody's disadvantaged by that actual being locked down for a bubble. And then the stage 4, of course, which none of us want to get to, is that lockdown again across all of the schools. And that will be the teachers are providing that progress from where the children are linked to their planning through the Google platform as well. So it's good for us to just think about it in those different phases and those different blocks, because it's different for different groups of children at different times, depending on what the situation is.
Thank you. So you're all Google schools or Google trusts. What have been the most useful sort of other
One of
apps?
the things that we do across the trust is Read Write Inc. for our phonics program. And they've produced a virtual package where if we do go into lockdown or a bubble is locked down, we can use their virtual teaching to put direct each sound in the Read Writing program directly into each of our homes. We also use the Accelerated Reader program across the trust. They use Myon, which is a reading platform that children can access at home as well on an ongoing sort of basis. So if they've finished the reading book because they're in lockdown and they haven't got reading materials in the home, then there's still an ability to be able to do that online as well. So we're researching more and more of these online facilities that will make sure children can continue in the learning remotely.
Yeah. And I mentioned a couple of the apps that we use. I won't mention them again in case people think I'm being sponsored by them, but there are really good apps out there. And actually one of our challenges being a trust has been to focus around a handful of them rather than buying every educational app that's out there. But one of the things that we've done is a lot of live streaming of lessons, and we're lucky enough to be a large trust, so we have a curriculum team that's done some of that. But actually, different experts in our academies around the country are really strong at particular things. So we've done lessons live from academies where they have streams to other academies around the country, and we've been able to construct a kind of a timetable of that, and that was particularly helpful back in the summer term, just having that constant timetable of live streamed lessons that followed a progression. It wasn't just isolated incidents of learning, it was actually building over time.
We've tried to do a bit of a blended program where we use in the Oak Academy as well, because obviously there's a lot of good stuff on there that the government have put on. So in terms of workload for our teachers as well, trying to look at that aspect. And if there is a block on, say, place value in maths that fits directly into our planning and where we are in the framework of teaching maths, then we're more than happy for those programs to be used and that sequence of learning to be used, as long as it is within the normal sequence that our children will be studying anyway.
Yeah, so we've used some of the lessons from the Oak Academy as well, and the same as Zoe, but also things like the Oxford University Press, and a number of the books that the children might use in school are now available online and things like that. So they've been able to continue with their reading online, and that, actually they're really quite good the way it's been done. And you've got activities at the end to kind of, for parents to ask the children questions, and so there's a number of things really which the schools are using, which are enhancing some of that learning, or certainly were enhancing some of that learning when they've needed to use it at home.
That's great. Thank you very much. That's really insightful. I know many of at Bett, we've worked closely with many of the tech providers and the app providers, and many offered a great free provision, which gave many educators a chance to try new stuff. So it's interesting
Sarah,
to
I think
see.
You wanted me to pick up on the experience of Ofsted that I had last week.
Absolutely.
So
yes,
we
please.
volunteered to have a pilot inspection of the visits that Ofsted are carrying out during the autumn term.
Yes.
It's always, from my experience, good to get that inner knowledge in order to know exactly what to expect later on. I have to say, although they say don't do any additional preparation for the visit, of course all schools do, it was a visit that was relatively harmless, should we say. It was nothing like the normal inspection. There was no evaluation of the information that was being given to them. It was simply to provide information to a national database and add to sort of a national survey almost of what is happening out in the education world and how we are all managing to adapt to these times. So there was some specific focus looking at attendance and what is our attendance like now compared to the time prior to COVID. What about staff? How many staff had been affected by COVID and how many staff were in school now compared to pre-COVID? Children's behaviour, how had children come back? What were we doing specifically to be able to support children with their behaviour? How had we adapted our behaviour policy in order to support children? And likewise, how had we supported our staff with their well-being? Recognising that it is a stressful time for everybody concerned. We also were asked a lot about not the time that had gone previously, unless it was really relevant to what was happening now, but what our recovery curriculum actually looked like and how were we making up for that lost time. And Ofsted were very interested in how we had identified what was missing, but also how we were systematically looking at, say, for example, in science, when would be the next time that unit sort of concept would be taught, and how we were deliberately including that element in the planning so that there wasn't any building blocks missing within that progression journey for the child. They were interested in that, particularly the systematic way that we were planning for that. They were interested in the way that we had adapted the curriculum in the first instance with a focus on the basic skills to try to catch them up, and how we had extended the school day. So in that staggering, prioritising year groups that we deemed to be most important, that have got the least time to catch up, for example, year 6 in the primary sector, making sure that we were building in more time to be able to address some of those gaps in learning. They didn't make any qualitative judgments around that. They just literally wrote down what we said and said that would be fed in. They were also very interested in what we've talked about there, that remote learning strategy, and how systematic it was really, and how we were prepared for making sure that children did continue with their education in the way that they would need to, and how quickly we could move to implement that strategy should the need arise. So at the end of the day, they didn't visit any lessons. They didn't walk around the school. They didn't talk to any parents. They were literally at the front of the school in a room all day, and the head teacher was able to identify which leaders were the best people to answer the focus discussions on those particular areas. So at the end of the day, they didn't give feedback. They just provided a sort of summary of what they had captured in the day. This is what the school is doing and has been doing to get that accuracy in terms of what you told them. So all in all, it wasn't a difficult experience. It was just a recording of the work that had been happening in the school.
That's great. Over to Matthew and Matthew, please.
Well, can I just jump in to just support everything Zoe said? We've had a small number of the pilots as well, and it's exactly, Zoe, as you've described. The only place where they gathered actual evidence, first-hand evidence, was safeguarding. So I don't know what your experience, Zoe, was, but they checked our single central record, they checked recent appointees, all those sorts of areas. So that's the one place where they kept gathering kind of real first-hand evidence. But everything else, as you've said, it's almost gathering information for a research exercise about the state of the nation rather than inspecting our schools.
Yeah, I'd certainly echo what Zoe and Matthew said. So we volunteered for a pilot, the same as Zoe. We've not had a call yet, but I think, like I say, we'd actually welcome it. I think it's it's important for schools and trusts to kind of put themselves forward for this type of thing. And particularly when it's a positive experience like Zoe's had and described so well. We have had a local school who aren't part of our trust who have had a pilot inspection, and their feedback was exactly the same as you've just heard. So I think that's positive as well, to hear that there's a consistency of approach.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I think that will be really helpful for many people to hear that. It's certainly reassuring. I have another question going back to our Q&A, which sort of links in a little bit with what Ofsted were looking for, and that's around provision and catch-up. And the question is from Basil Schall, and it's whether any schools you plan to take up the government's national tutoring programme in any of your schools.
Matthew, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think we'll certainly, we'll look to take any help we can get. It's kind of we're very happy to be part of it, particularly if it's going to be useful. And I think we'll assess it, and as long as we feel that it's going to support what we're doing in school, then we'll definitely take up the offer.
Yeah, and us too. And I think, as I understand, the National Tuition Partners, the government will pay for 75% of the cost of the small group online tuition. I'm slightly suspicious about that, because I think some of the providers will correspondingly put their prices up. But we'll see. But we absolutely will be taking advantage of that, and also the academic mentors. So the colleagues who are available to come and work, it's curriculum as everyone else, and their gaps are filled in, and then it's all about great whole class teaching. Anything we can do to make that happen, we're there for.
Matthew, do you want to come in on that as well? Okay, so my next question, I'd like to link together a couple of questions that are coming through on the chat and to talk a little bit about staff training and supporting staff. Somebody's asked about how comfortable staff feel presenting to video. Some people are asking about sort of changes in pedagogy. So I suppose the question is just to all of you, looking across your trusts, where do you feel the gaps are, or where do you feel you're needing to build in extra training and CPD for your teachers?
So I certainly think in terms of technology and the use of technology, but I think we've had kind of a good 6 months now at being able to at least make a good start with that. I would say our staff are certainly, far ahead in terms of their use of technology than 6 months ago, because it's almost forced our hand in being able to do that. The use of Zoom, for example, how many trusts were using that widely before, and kind of now all of a sudden it's commonplace. So I think certainly around the use of technology to really make sure that you get effective teaching and learning off the back of that. I think that's kind of something that we've already made a good start on, but we're continuing to do that.
I think as well the SEMH elements and the pupil well-being. I think a lot of our staff, we're already heavily focused on that as a trust, but being known how best to support our children, because services as well have been very intermittent in terms of if they are back fully functioning. So never seems to be enough local authority services anyway to support children in those vital areas. So that's certainly an area that we are prioritising as a trust as well. All of our staff are going to become, in each of our schools, we're going to have mental health first aiders for both staff and for children as well, and utilising the expertise of our special school, who really do an amazing job with working with children with those social, emotional and mental health needs. So trying to utilise the strength that we have within as a means of being able to, develop others as well.
Mm-hmm. And that point really resonates with us as well. I think, I mentioned we've got our 5 special schools, and, some of the feedback actually in terms of doing your lesson virtually through the laptop screen for some of our autistic boys, for example, but by no means limited to them, but particularly for them, actually doing the learning as virtual learning has been a more positive experience for them than some of the face-to-face stuff that came before. And actually, Pete, the head teacher at one of our special schools at the Ridge, has restructured his school day to have less physical movement, to take more advantage of that, because that's working really well for some of those pupils. But I mean, I'd echo what Matthew said at the start in terms of staff readiness to deliver virtually. That's been a 6-month journey, and we had our tier 1, 2, 3, and tier 1 was we're ready to send some materials home electronically or by post. Tier 2 is we're ready to deliver recorded, and tier 3 is we're ready to deliver live stream lessons with the various apps and so on that support it. And that's about confidence and CPD and training, but it's also about understanding what the different components of the lesson are really clearly and what works for each. So there's a direct instruction element of it, but then there's the interactive elements of it, and understanding how each of those function and which is the best technique to use for each. And you just keep learning that, you keep reinforcing the CPD, and it grows.
Yeah. And I think just to continue with that, it's been the use of technology to actually get our staff together. So for us, during lockdown, to be able to get 200 plus staff, at a time onto a Zoom, and we've been able to deliver training right through lockdown still. And our staff have actually really enjoyed coming together as a family. Like I said, it's lovely for them to see, each other's, when perhaps they weren't seeing many people at that time. So we've had some really top class CPD from the likes of Richard Gerver and Sharon Gray, Basit Siddiqui during that period. But also we've been able to use technology to kind of celebrate and kind of come together for more of a social side of things as well. So we were able to kind of get all our staff together on a Zoom. We had 300 plus staff, and they came onto a Zoom, and we had Sophie Evans, who's a top singer. She was Glinda in Wicked for 2 years running on the West End, and she did a Zoom concert live from her kitchen. She has actually got a beautiful kitchen, so it's it worked as a backdrop. But we were able to have an evening where we had all our staff together. They were able to sit with their families at home, and I think we had staff, governors, trustees, kind of able to get them together and just really offer that as a thank you for all the hard work during that period. So you know, there are real positives as well that we've been able to draw from this experience as well.
That's
lovely.
That's really fantastic. It's a lovely story. Thinking ahead, you know, you've mentioned your tier 1, tier 3, tier 2, tier 3 strategy to move to remote learning or hybrid. Thinking as leaders of large trusts more broadly, how has your long-term digital strategy changed? What is it? Is it still in a work in progress? How is it evolving?
Well, I don't know what others think, but I think it's accelerated our digital strategy. So we were always heading in the direction of putting a Chromebook in the hands of every child from kind of year 3 up through to year 13. But we're getting there a lot quicker than we would have done, because we've proved to ourselves how valuable it is, and how, I suppose, not only does it build resilience if a bubble goes down or whatever, but it creates opportunities. So this is not strictly an answer about the digital part, but think about what it enables. So we've got a dozen sixth forms in various places around the country. They're of a decent size, but they can't offer every course imaginable. But we don't want any pupil to be in an AET sixth form and told, I'm sorry, you can't study that here because we don't have the staff. But actually, you can start to have experts in the different sixth forms who are beaming some of that in, using the digital tech that we've got. But crucially, taking a kind of masterclass approach, so working with the staff on the site where the students are in advance, so that they can then support with that learning. So I think it's more about what digital enables. So that really strong thing of having the devices, having the relationship with Google that we have in all those materials, and then exploiting it. So, you know, we've got lots of schools now offering the Cambridge Pre-U qualification in sixth form. Mm. Whereas before we had that in only one sixth form, we can spread it round, and it's all about finding what the gains are for the children and the young people in our care. So that's the strategy.
Matthew, over to you.
Yeah, no, so I'd agree that ours has definitely been fast-tracked, you know, and in terms of our digital strategy, it certainly was important to us, and it was something we were going to be doing, but now it's kind of front and center, really, and I think we know and we understand that we need to have, you know, a real strong solution in place for our schools and for our staff and our children, and kind of get that ASAP. And I agree in terms of it's about getting a device and also the right Wi-Fi in the hands of children. So that's a massive part of it. I mean, we had ours in terms of our digital strategy. We're also looking at the information we can get, you know, as a kind of centrally as a trust, and how can we get that information quickly from 12 schools. I imagine, you know, Matthew would be able to help us with that, and that you know, that they have to, if they're getting it from 50 plus schools, it's you know, that is obviously, you know, it's becoming more and more important to us as a growing trust. So we've gone from 7 to 9 to 12 schools, and it's being able to, you know, how can we put a hand on the attendance every day, you know, which wasn't necessarily, if you go back 6 months, it wasn't uppermost in our mind. Did we know the attendance each day? Whereas now it becomes really important. So it's you know, it's those type of things really. It is not just the digital strategy for the children, but also for us as a trust and how we kind of evolve as a trust.
Yeah, and we've had to go through that pain barrier as well, Matthew, and luckily we've done that in the last couple couple of years. So, for example, we're on Cloud School from Advanced for all of our MI for 57 academies. We've got one more to get onto it, but that means that, barring their servers going down at the wrong time, you can absolutely get that attendance data, and it's painful to get everyone on the same system, but it's so worth it because you can just put your finger on what's going on. So yeah, I'd really echo that.
No, absolutely.
That's great, Zoe. Over to you. What does your longer term digital strategy look like now? How has it changed? So I think Zoe's struggling to hear us.
Yeah, so in terms of our digital strategy, I think it's so important when you're working with a larger organisation to have that centrally coordinated and certainly have the know-how to be able to implement a digital strategy. Across the trust, we have got an IT strategy where we've assessed the hardware sort of devices, the hardware that you can't see that's built into the walls, etc. You can tell that I'm not leading on the digital strategy, but we've kind of got a basic entitlement that we expect all children to be able to have. So it doesn't matter if it's a larger school or a smaller school, and we're prioritising our funding to have a basic offer in all of our schools so that there is a set number of Chromebooks or iPads. We're trying to fairly increase that over time so that all of our children are getting that same offer. But in terms of the learning that we've done from this particular time, we want our children and our families to be able to move swiftly onto that remote learning. So we don't want to stop using our Chromebooks and our Google Classroom technology in the classroom, because if we do, we're then taking a step back in time. So we want to keep on getting better at the strategies that we've been learning. And obviously staff with any new learning are in different places. So there's those who are the real experts, and we're learning from them, and we're using the Google Hangout technology to deliver that training to others from the people who are the real, have set themselves up as the experts within the trust to do it. But I think the need for that overall central strategy that's being pushed from the centre with the funding behind it is the key to actually delivering the success that we're going to need as we work through this pandemic together.
Thank you. That's great. We have time for one more question here, and I'd like to go to a question that's been voted on a few times in the chat, which is about safeguarding, actually. And so, with so many students either working part at home and part in school, and so many students now on devices, what are you putting in place to keep your children focused on learning and not accessing inappropriate content through school devices? So I don't know Matthew, do you want to, with your ambition, I guess you've got a good answer to this.
Yeah, well, thanks, Sarah. We invested in eSafe prior to lockdown, and what's great about that is it can monitor every single AAT device, or when someone's logging into a Google account and using AAT materials, can monitor. And I'd say there are two things. First of all, it's great to have that technology, but the thing that then needs to go along with it is young people and their parents need to know that we are seeing what they're looking at. So we have had instances of what we think is parents accessing material that none of us would want them to at 2 a.m. And the fact that the school and then the designated safeguarding lead for the trust are in touch with them the next day saying, so we noticed that this access was made. Can you check that your child is okay, because that's not what AAT materials are used for. The fact of doing that creates a culture where students and parents think before they click on the wrong things. And that's not about being Big Brother. That's about stopping our children looking at material that isn't good for them. I mean, there's some other things that have come up from that. The number of children looking up things that are about body image that suggest that they have a great deal of insecurity about their body image. The number looking at things connected with self-harm or with suicide. It's not an enormous number, but it is a real number. And what we want to do is spot that and then have a loving, supportive conversation with those children, through the teachers who work with them normally as soon as possible. So we do all the usual things in terms of face-to-face safeguarding, checking our staff, all that sort of thing. But in this remote world, having a means of seeing what pupils are looking at with your tech is really important to stop the bad stuff happening, but also to be able to intervene pastorally at the right moment for them. So I couldn't kind of endorse that approach highly enough.
And again, sorry, the name of the platform, or the name of the
eSafe.
eSafe. Thank you
so
so much.
We train all our staff with guide training, and eSafe is the technology that lets us see what's going on.
Okay, brilliant. So I'm going to bring Zoe in on
Yes, so
that now.
we are very much trying to invest in the Chromebook solution, because I'm reliably informed by our IT technical support that it's the most easy device to be able to put the smooth wall. So we use smooth wall as our filtering service within school, and that same smooth wall system is then applied on the Chromebooks at home, and our head teachers will still get alerts in the same way that they do now if any pupil is searching for inappropriate material. But also we're looking at another solution, which all of the other devices that we've got, we want to unlock the ability to be used in the home as well, such as iPads and other laptops that are not Chromebooks. So we're just about to launch into a free trial of another piece of software. I'm not sure what it's called, sorry, but I can provide that later if need be. That will then put a filtering solution to safeguard pupils using the internet at home as well. We, of course, are putting user agreements around where those computers should be used at home, for what purpose, which we're expecting parents to sign up to. But of course, sometimes we know that might always be the case. So we have to make sure that filtering solution for our pupils is robust, and I'm confident that it is.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Matthew?
Yeah, no, thank you. So I'd certainly echo and agree with everything that's been said. And the only thing I would add is that it continues, the education of kind of parents and pupils continues to be really, really important. So that used to be pre-COVID, inviting parents in for online safety workshops. And I think the challenge now is kind of how do we deliver those? Because we've probably got to deliver them online. But making sure we kind of deliver those and still get the information and how important that is really for parents and children. So the children can obviously still get that information and be educated on that in school. But I think how do we access the parents and continue to provide them with the information and some of the dangers out there, so that they kind of avoid some awkward and horrible kind of circumstances.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you. We're drawing to the end of our time, unfortunately, but it's been so interesting to hear from you all. Just a final comment from you all. I'd like to know 3 words to describe this September. And Matthew, Purves, do you want to start? And then, yes, we'll go from there.
I wasn't expecting this question. Okay. Exciting, stretching, and back.
Zoe, can you hear? Your turn.
So the 3 final words I would need to use, I think first of all, September for me has been heartwarming in the first instance, because it's been such a pleasure just to see our children back in school, enjoying themselves, resuming their normal learning. The next one, I think, is the word reactive, because as was mentioned right in the opening, I think our leaders in school and our teachers in school are just having to be so flexible, more so than ever before, to be able to respond and react to the situation that is forever changing. And finally, I think intense. As a leader in a trust, it's been such an intense time to just get everything achieved and make sure that you've left no stone unturned to safeguard everybody and keep staff's welfare and pupil welfare at heart.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Matthew?
Yeah, no, thank you. So great question. So I think the first word I'd use is crazy, because it really has been a crazy period, like Zoe described, and one like we've perhaps never known before. I'd also use supportive, and I think one of the beauties of being in a trust is to see how everyone supported each other. And I think, two of our core beliefs as a trust are family and teamwork. And I think the way that our family has kind of worked together as a team in this period has been amazing. And then the last is positive. And I think we've still been able to take lots of positive things out of this period. So things like our staff working together on a recovery program and to produce such a brilliant resource, that has been a massive positive for us. But also positive just to see the children back and see the schools buzzing again. That's been amazing. So a lot more than 3 words, but those are my three words.
And with that, our time is up. So I'd like to thank you all, Matthew and Zoe, for your very candid, open contributions today. And I'd like to thank everybody who has participated as an attendee. Please do download the handouts. We'd love to share all the knowledge with you, and we hope to welcome you at a future session. Thanks so much to everybody for their time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care, everyone.
So this gives us a couple of seconds to say goodbye, but it kicks us out super quickly. But I will email you to say thank